She's the most celebrated First Lady of the ancient world. For 3,000 years, an icon of beauty, power, and mystery.
She's one of the few characters from history who has real power as a woman.
She may have ruled the greatest empire on Earth. She may have been King Tut's mother. But all we know for certain is that at the height of her power, she seems to have vanished without a trace.
It is the dream of anyone to discover the mummy of Nefertiti.
Zahi Hawass is trying to find ancient Egypt's most mysterious leading lady. What really happened to this extraordinary woman? Where is Queen Nefertiti? Ancient Egypt's Queen Nefertiti, the woman who launched 1,000 myths. After 3,000 years, the facts of her story are not easy to piece together. We do know she rose to a position of unprecedented power, and from images we have of her, it's clear she was exceptional. At the height of her rule, her face was everywhere. Then she just disappeared, and her body has never been found. Now, archaeologist Zahi Hawass wants to find her so she can reveal the deepest secrets of her own life for herself.
Using, for the first time, science. Maybe this will lead us to the discovery of the mummy of Queen Nefertiti.
Hawass assembles a team of specialists to gather all the evidence and information he can. Our first real glimpse of Nefertiti came in 1912. Archaeologists dug up a 3,000-year-old bust. A beautiful face emerged from the sand, and it made Queen Nefertiti an object of fascination all over the world. Historian Bettany Hughes is an expert on women in the ancient world. She's heading to Berlin's Neues Museum to see the ancient image of Nefertiti for herself.
It's really exciting to be here in Berlin because I've been fascinated by Nefertiti for years. And of course, this is where her world-famous bust is kept.
This is Queen Nefertiti, one of the best-known faces from ancient Egypt.
What's incredible about her is that she burns very, very bright, and then it seems that she's snuffed out, which makes her life incredibly intriguing.
If this face could only speak, what secrets would it tell?
We have this beautiful face, and yet we have so many questions still unanswered about her.
And Bettany wonders if the bust itself might hold some answers. But the biggest question remains, where is the ancient queen herself? The tomb that was prepared for her lies empty. Her real burial site has never been found. She could be anywhere. Archaeologists have discovered countless unidentified Egyptian mummies over the years. It's a real possibility Nefertiti could be among them. But how to recognize her?
Science can identify many important things, can make many important discoveries. With DNA now, we can really identify mummies.
DNA analysis will be the primary tool in this new hunt for Nefertiti. Nefertiti was royalty. So Zahi and his team begin their search in the Valley of the Kings, ancient Egypt's most exclusive burial ground. And they already have a suspect. A mummy known only as the Younger Lady of Tomb KB35. DNA analysis says that she is the mother of Egypt's legendary pharaoh, Tutankhamun, King Tut. Tut's father, Akhenaten, was married to Nefertiti and had children with her. So this could be Nefertiti. But then Akhenaten had more than one wife. So even though the DNA has identified the mummy as Tut's mother, it hasn't yet given us her name. Now the forensic team begins to focus on the mummy's physical characteristics to see what they can find. It may not seem possible, but there are striking similarities between the head of this mummy and the famous Nefertiti bust in Berlin.
It's quite apparent that the neck is quite long. So, and also the face, the cheekbones are a little bit high. The forehead appears...
The neck, the contour of her face, the double piercing in the left ear. All these can be found on the Berlin bust as well.
But few fragments compared to the size of...
The method of mummification indicates this mummy lived at about the same time as Nefertiti. And she was someone of high rank.
She might be a noble person.
But we can say it's
question mark.
Okay.
But none of this is conclusive proof, one way or the other. The evidence only suggests the younger lady mummy could be Queen Nefertiti. To investigate her further, Zahi is moving this younger lady from her tomb in the Valley of the Kings to join some of ancient Egypt's most distinguished mummies at the Cairo Museum. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Bethany Hughes is following another forensic exam.
Because we know her bust so well, it's almost as if we know her, but actually, I don't think her face is telling the whole story.
A CT scan of the bust reveals another face beneath the plaster surface.
You see that we make the bust transparent. And now we see the inner core of the bust.
I never thought that I'd be able to peel back a layer of skin and see underneath Nefertiti's face. And what's revealed is extraordinary, and not just a perfect woman, but a real woman, a woman who's really lived.
But what explains the second face under the surface? There are lines on the face of the inner layer. They could be purely practical to hold the plaster to the limestone surface. Or they could be real human wrinkles. Perhaps this is the true likeness of Nefertiti, taken from a mask of her living face, then smoothed over by the artist to make her appear more beautiful, a kind of ancient form of airbrushing.
What I can see is what immense care they've taken, and that they've tried to make this as perfect as possible, you know, as perfect a human face as possible.
This discovery in Berlin sends Zahi to the Cairo Museum to examine another Nefertiti bust. This one was never finished. His team will use CT scans and digital photography to compare this to the Berlin bust. Zahi sends all the CT scans from Berlin and Cairo to the lab of ethnologist Franco Crevatin in Italy. Here, Stefano Anselmo, an expert in ancient art and cosmetics, will attempt a composite portrait of Nefertiti based on all the different images we have of her.
Nel ritratto rosa a sinistra, la bocca è un pochino più piccola rispetto alle altre. Anche il naso è più grosso.
Zahi hopes the composite will help identify some common denominators in her appearance. But to identify the mummy of Nefertiti conclusively, he needs something else: DNA. He has to find one of her close blood relatives to match their genes. It's the only way. To find one, he starts by reconstructing Nefertiti's early life story.
It is likely Nefertiti came from one of the most important family in Egypt.
She must have come from a reasonably prominent, high-status background. And it is likely, therefore, that she will have been within the close circle of the Egyptian royal family.
On the west bank of the Nile, Zahi and a team of archaeologists are excavating an ancient mortuary temple trying to find the first pieces of Nefertiti's story.
I mean, to discover just under the sand a few minutes ago a major important discovery.
The team has unearthed massive statues of the mighty pharaoh Amenhotep III and his wife, Queen T. Nefertiti was born during their reign and may have even grown up in their palace.
Queen T may be one of the strongest queens in ancient Egypt because in all her statues, she was shown equal to the king.
But it's Queen T's genes that might hold the essential link to Nefertiti. Zahi has Queen T's mummy, and T may have been Nefertiti's aunt, her father's sister. Nefertiti grows up playing with her cousins, Queen T's children. One of those cousins is Queen T's son, the Crown Prince, Akhenaten. He and Nefertiti were betrothed at a young age.
Whether it was a love match or an arranged marriage, almost certainly given the political dimension of such things, it was probably arranged.
Nefertiti and the Crown Prince are barely more than children when they marry. But it's not long before Akhenaten becomes pharaoh. Nefertiti is now married to the most powerful man in the world. She's just a teenager, but she's about to change the course of Egyptian history. Zahi Hawass is searching for Nefertiti's mummy and gathering a collection of prime suspects at the Cairo Museum, including the mummy of King Tut's anonymous mother. Searching through hundreds of the museum's mummies, Zahi gathers every likely unidentified female and begins the final elimination process.
I really believe that this mummy is not related at all to the period of the Amarna.
Zahi's trained eye can detect clues that a mummy isn't royalty.
This mummy cannot be Nefertiti.
Or the mummification method is from the wrong era.
This mummy belonged to Dynasty 17.
His short list is down to 3. King Tut's anonymous mother, and 2 more females from another ancient burial chamber in the Valley of the Kings, tomb KV-21.
The 2 mummies that I'm very interested are these 2 mummies.
One of these 3 nameless mummies could be Egypt's legendary Queen Nefertiti. On the hunt for more information about the missing queen, Bettany Hughes has traveled to the city of Luxor in Egypt. She's come to Karnak Temple, a place where Nefertiti spent her early years.
This has to be one of the greatest temple complexes in the whole world. It covers over 1.5 miles.
What I love about it is when you walk through, it's like 4,000 years of living Egyptian history.
These monuments chronicle centuries of ancient Egyptian royalty. But the names Nefertiti and Akhenaten are nowhere to be found. That's because Akhenaten's temple was destroyed at the end of his rule.
It's been going for 2 years so far.
A team of archaeologists take Bettany to the one place some of its fragments survive.
How many blocks have you got in here?
Just under 16,000.
These are the remains of Akhenaten's temple.
So is that her?
Oh yes, I think this is what you've been looking for. Yes, this is Nefertiti herself.
It's fantastic, because we've been looking for her everywhere in the temple complex, and then she turns up here in one of these blocks.
There's absolutely nothing accidental.
More than one.
Her face was destroyed.
Now Nefertiti's story begins to come to life.
Well, she's looking very regal and also in charge of religious matters, so this is a woman with real power.
The images depict the young Nefertiti rising to a position of prominence,
these blocks are our hard evidence of what was going on. So if we can investigate them, then maybe we're going to start to piece together the truth of the story. Which is another image of Nefertiti.
Oh, yes.
The truth is, Akhenaten's temple was deliberately torn down by powerful enemies. Enemies he and Nefertiti made while trying to change the course of Egyptian history. Four or 5 years into their reign, the royal couple rebelled against Egyptian tradition.
Nefertiti and Akhenaten do something which seems to me completely crazy. I mean, they kind of turn the world upside down because they decide to worship not the thousands of gods and spirits in the Egyptian world, but just one true god, the Aten, the great sun disk. And this has to be one of the most radical things that ever happened in Egyptian history.
Akhenaten and Nefertiti turn their backs on the old gods and ancient ways and leave Karnak. Together, they build a new capital city called Amarna. Today, Amarna is a desolate place deep in the desert. Bethany Hughes is looking for signs of Nefertiti and her relatives with archaeologist Barry Kemp. He's been excavating here for more than 25 years.
It's certainly not an obvious place to found a city.
No, it was even more desert-like then than it is now.
Here, Nefertiti and her husband ruled side by side, devoted to their new religion and to each other.
Passion and religion, that's a strong, powerful combination. I wonder if the fact that they were so close somehow gave them the confidence to embark on this very extreme religious experiment.
Yes, I'm sure that is so. If you have a person who's very, very close to you, you will step further than you would otherwise have done.
But their experiment was in trouble from the start. Back in Cairo, Zahi is looking for other members of Nefertiti's family. Only a DNA match with a close blood relative can identify Nefertiti. They have DNA samples from Queen T. She could be Nefertiti's aunt, but that's not certain. Zahi needs a relative who shares not just Nefertiti's history, but her DNA as well.
We know that Nefertiti had a half-sister called Mut Nejmet. To find her body or bones will be very important to our investigation.
Years ago, Mut Nejmet was discovered in a burial chamber in Saqqara, an ancient city of the dead. But like so many others, she's now missing. If they can find her again, they'll have the genetic key they need to identify Queen Nefertiti.
There is skulls everywhere. We have to go through all the bones.
But she could be anywhere in this vast complex of tombs. The team searches through 3,000 years of Egyptian history. But Zahi finds no trace of Mut Nejmet.
Then we'll not lose hope. We have to continue. We have to have the bones of the queen, and we will find it.
But Saqqara seems like a dead end. Zahi leaves without Nefertiti's half-sister, and he still doesn't have a confirmed close relative to help him identify Nefertiti's mummy. Until he finds one, he'll never find the ancient queen. At the lab in Italy, Stefano Anselmo is putting the finishing touches on his composite of Nefertiti's face, trying to flesh out exactly what the queen looked like in life. Today, Nefertiti is a symbol of feminine perfection and beauty. Back then, that beauty was more than an accident of birth. It meant something important.
beauty wasn't just a coincidence, it was thought to be a gift of the gods. So the fact that Nefertiti is so beautiful would have meant that in the eyes of her people, she was special, she was blessed.
Nefertiti's beauty was certainly one of the keys to her power and influence, and she had to maintain it. Anselmo replicates the makeup style popular with royals 3,000 years ago. Dark pigment around the eyes and oxidized iron on the lips and cheeks for color.
For the cheeks, for lips, and maybe for eyelids too, is exactly the same product that a woman uses today for their makeup, exactly.
Anselmo's final touch, traditional Egyptian eyeshadow. And here she is. This could be the face of the woman Zahi's been looking for. Nefertiti wasn't just a queen, she was also a mother. In their new capital, Amarna, she and her husband began to raise a family. In an age when childbirth was very risky, Nefertiti produced one baby after another. Bethany is looking for traces of the children to help Zahi in his search for genetic links.
I think that this is one of the most beautiful portraits that there is of Nefertiti, because this really is Nefertiti, the woman. She's cradling one of her children in her lap, and she's even letting one of her daughters play with the jewelry on her headdress. So this is Nefertiti, the real woman, at home with her family, being just an ordinary mother.
There's just one problem for the royal couple. All of these children are daughters. Not a male heir among them. Images of the royal family depict them living in a city of wealth and abundance. But Barry Kemp's excavation of an ancient cemetery in Amarna says something else.
This is a cemetery, and it's a very large one. There might be a minimum number of 2,000 people.
And the graves hold a surprise. These are all young people.
People who should be at their fittest, their healthiest, 15 to 25, there's a peak of death. That is a pattern which is known from historical times to occur when there is an epidemic.
Now, Hughes and Kemp begin looking for evidence of victims among the royal family.
We've come down into this tomb, and this is the tomb for one of Nefertiti's daughters. You can see her there. And the whole family is consumed with grief. What you're looking at here is Nefertiti, no longer the powerful queen who has the world laid out at her feet. This is a mother who is mourning desperately the loss of one of her daughters. You get the sense that things are starting to go wrong here in Amarna.
Nefertiti bore 6 daughters. Now there are 5. But carved into the stone walls is another image of her royal family with a young boy. Did Nefertiti finally bear a son? Is this the future King Tut? Akhenaten was the father of King Tut and husband of Nefertiti. Could this be evidence that Nefertiti is Tut's mother? The DNA says the nameless younger woman at the Cairo Museum is Tut's mother. So is this Nefertiti herself? Persuasive, but it's not hard proof. At the DNA lab in Cairo, Zahi's team has been sequencing DNA samples from all 3 female mummies who might be Nefertiti. And they make a discovery.
That's perfect. Look at that, you know? Incredible. It's just wonderful, huh? Perfect.
A discovery big enough for Zahi Hawass to call a press conference at the Cairo Museum. Journalists gathered from around the world.
I would like to announce today a very important discovery.
Nobody outside his small team of scientists knows what the announcement will be. Only that Zahi Hawass will reveal the answer to a 3,000-year-old mystery.
I'd like to announce today a major important discovery. This discovery can confirm for sure that this is not the mummy of Nefertiti. Myself. He used to.
The DNA proves it. This mummy is Tut's mother, but she's not Nefertiti. The DNA says that she's the daughter of Queen T and Amenhotep III. Historians know these were not Nefertiti's parents. Tut's mother might be Nefertiti's cousin, but even that's not 100% sure. So this suspect has been crossed off the list. She's not Nefertiti. But she is the mother of King Tut. Now the surprise. The DNA also says she and Tut's father were brother and sister. Incestuous marriages were common among royals in ancient Egypt. It wouldn't have been a problem for anyone at the time, except perhaps for Nefertiti, who couldn't produce the male heir.
This is a terrible time for Nefertiti because she's lost one of her beautiful, beloved daughters, and she's having to live with the fact that Akhenaten's sister has managed to father the son that she could never give him. So it's tragic. It's tragic in so many ways, this.
No one knows exactly how Tut's mother died. But whatever happened, Nefertiti, always quick to recognize an opportunity, grabs this one. She takes Tut in, and he grows up surrounded by her 5 daughters, his half-sisters. Then, to increase her hold on power, the great queen arranges one more incestuous royal marriage.
Ankh-Senamun was one of Nefertiti's beautiful daughters, and we know that Nefertiti married this daughter to King Tut. So even though Nefertiti herself doesn't have a son, her line continues.
Nefertiti is now Tut's stepmother and his mother-in-law. She will also be the grandmother of Tut's children. Which gives Zahi a new idea. Discovered in Tut's tomb were 2 tiny mummies. They might provide the DNA profile he's been looking for.
These 2 coffins were found inside the treasury room of the tomb of Tutankhamun by Howard Carter. When he opened them, he found 2 fetuses. He found out that they could be the female daughters of Tutankhamun.
Any daughters of King Tut and his wife would be Nefertiti's granddaughters by blood. And the DNA has already identified these fetuses as King Tut's daughters. These are Nefertiti's granddaughters. Now the team wants to sequence their mitochondrial DNA. That's DNA passed straight down the family's female line. From Nefertiti to her daughter, Tut's wife, to her granddaughters.
It's wonderful, you know, because we got these 3 key players, you know, for maybe finding Nefertiti.
Nefertiti's granddaughter's DNA. That's the key to finding Nefertiti. Now, if they can just extract that female DNA from the fetuses.
It is difficult. The fetuses are in not very good condition. They are very, very tiny, and they are very fragmented.
The tiny, badly damaged fetuses don't leave the team much to work with. And ancient mitochondrial DNA is notoriously tricky to extract. It's easily contaminated and often hard to analyze. But these poor fetuses might be the only chance to establish a genetic link to Egypt's legendary queen.
I'm pretty sure that in the end we will come up with a result, whether we can say, yes, we have found Nefertiti or not.
With the marriage of her daughter to King Tut, Nefertiti has positioned herself as the power behind the throne. But her life story is about to take another bizarre turn.
Well, last time we find Nefertiti as Queen Nefertiti is in year 12 of Akhenaten, after which she disappears.
At the height of her power, Nefertiti's name disappears from all historical records. This usually signals a death. Yet indications are her story is far from over, because this extraordinary woman is about to reinvent herself into something even more astonishing. Zahi Hawass has finally identified two of Nefertiti's blood relatives. The fetuses found in King Tut's tomb are her granddaughters. They could provide the genetic link he needs to identify her mummy. But the team is having trouble extracting enough usable DNA.
It's a sample that is badly preserved.
The tissues were very friable. So this also gives us a lot of problems.
Meanwhile, Zahi has narrowed down his list of Nefertiti suspects to the pair of unidentified female royals from tomb KV-21.
The arms, because actually...
But his team is having trouble extracting DNA from these mummies as well.
So far, we have not succeeded to have complete DNA data, and this is essentially needed, you know, to end up with statistically significant results.
The early results look promising.
The DNA items that we collected so far, they are highly similar with the rest of the family. So we are now completing their DNA profiles in order to see if they are the mothers of the fetuses.
While the genetics team works on the DNA, the forensic team takes CT scans of the two female mummies. They want to find out how old the women were when they died. The team also needs to establish how old Nefertiti was when she passed away. There's conflicting evidence in the historical record. The name Nefertiti disappears around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign. That usually means a person has died. She would have been in her late 20s to mid-30s. But a statue in the Berlin Museum depicts Nefertiti as a much older woman. So what happened to her? Zahi travels to London's Petrie Museum to examine fragments of a small stele discovered in Amarna. The inscriptions indicate that Nefertiti didn't die in year 12, but that she may have assumed even greater control over the empire.
This can suggest and made scholars to believe that actually Nefertiti was Akhenaten's co-regent.
Co-regent would have meant she actually shared the power of the king. But this is where Zahi has to read between the lines. The name Nefertiti disappears while Akhenaten is still alive, and a new name appears. Neferuaten. Zahi believes that Nefertiti reinvented herself as the co-ruler of Egypt and took the name Neferuaten.
Neferuaten is a very enigmatic figure. Now, that sounds very like a derivation of Nefertiti's own name, and we actually know that this person was a woman because she has feminine endings. So it is possible that Nefertiti actually co-ruled.
If so, that co-rule was short-lived, just 5 years. When Akhenaten dies, a backlash begins against his radical, unpopular regime.
Amarna was abandoned because its purpose had ended. I think everybody breathed a sigh of relief when the whole experiment was over and they could go back to normal.
But no one knows exactly what happened to Nefertiti after Akhenaten's death. Bethany Hughes and Barry Kemp look for clues in the empty tomb that was built for her in Amarna.
The argument runs that this is intended to be a royal tomb. It shares its entranceway with Akhenaten's, so it's someone very close Who could that be except Nefertiti?
And Nefertiti, theoretically, was going to be buried up here, was she?
Yes, yes. Had they continued their work, this was to be the burial chamber.
Well, there is one possibility that maybe she didn't die here. Maybe she lived on to become a pharaoh.
With the death of her husband, perhaps Nefertiti did take her power to the next level. It's likely she packed up her family, left Amarna, and followed the priests and court officials back to Karnak and Luxor. At the time, Crown Prince Tut was a boy of 8 or 9, too young to rule on his own. Egypt needed a pharaoh. It was the role Nefertiti had prepared for her entire life. Zahi follows their route, attempting to pick up her story back in the old city.
Now we'll see one of the evidence that Nefertiti is doing the task of a king, smiting an enemy.
On a tiny fragment at Luxor Temple, Zahi sees what may well be evidence. Nefer-Nefer-Uwatan as pharaoh.
Look at the scene. She's standing, smiting, and the enemy is underneath. Smiting enemies cannot be connected with queenship. It has to be connected with kingship.
Could Nefertiti really be a female pharaoh after the fall of Amarna? Artifacts found in Tut's tomb support this new twist in Nefertiti's story. They include small gold statues of a pharaoh with a woman's figure, and items of jewelry bearing her name.
This picture, it has the name of Nefer-Neferu-Uwatan. I could see maybe there is a chance that this Nefer-Neferu-Uwatan could be one of the names of Nefertiti when she was a king.
Zahi's hunt enters its final phase with intriguing questions. Did the extraordinary Nefertiti reinvent herself as Nefer-Nefer-Uwatan? Did she rule Egypt as a pharaoh? And could she be one of the females from tomb KV-21? In a tomb near Luxor, Aidan Dodson finds ancient graffiti that could be the first real proof Nefertiti ruled Egypt.
I think she carried on being co-regent and carried on into Tutankhaten's reign.
The tomb contains written confirmation of the scenario historians have speculated about for years.
I'm excited about this because it is the one dated inscription from the period where Nefertiti had become a pharaoh. She was now a fully fledged pharaoh.
As pharaoh Nefer-Nefer-Uwatan, Nefertiti begins to restore Egypt's traditional customs and religion.
I think the moment that Akhenaten was dead, the new regime of Nefertiti and Tutankhaten began to be more generally spread around Egypt.
Nefertiti would have also prepared Tut for his reign as pharaoh. His legacy is her legacy, and it had to be protected.
In the end, what kings want, or what royal families want more than anything, is to keep going, to perpetuate themselves.
To do that, Tut married his half-sister. Ancient royals believed such incestuous marriages preserved the purity of their divine blood. In fact, incest doomed Egypt's 18th dynasty. King Tut never produced a living heir.
Pharaoh Akhenaten lay with one of his sisters, and the result was the boy King Tut. King Tut then goes on to marry his half-sister, and the result of that are these fetuses that lie in his tomb. So it's 2 generations of incest. This is the end of the 18th dynasty. It's the end of the line.
And now it's strange, but these 2 stillborn fetuses may hold the only key to the identity of Nefertiti's mummy. At the lab, Zahi's forensic team has the CT scan results from their 2 prime suspects, the 2 females from tomb KV-21.
So we analyzed the CT images, and they have shown us that one is a young woman at about 20 years old, and the other one is an elder woman around 40 years of age.
The younger mummy is eliminated. She died too young to be Nefertiti, mother of 6, pharaoh of Egypt. Only the older mummy is still in the running, but the ultimate proof will be genetic. The team in Cairo has been analyzing the samples to see if the fetuses can identify the older mummy as their grandmother, Nefertiti.
We have a sequence each of KB21A, B, and the fetus, the large one.
It looks like that the sequence is matching perfectly here. So they're related. They're related.
Another surprise. Both female mummies are related to the 2 fetuses.
All the other markers that we have tested.
We're looking at the mitochondrial DNA analysis of KB21A and B and the fetus, and they're showing identical mitochondrial DNA.
So who are these 2 women? The scientists don't have enough genetic data to tell.
It's well possible that one mum is Antensamun, the mother of the fetuses, and the other one is the mother of Antensamun. This would mean Nefertiti.
So the older mummy is still the prime suspect. She could well be Nefertiti. But one thing the fetuses have given them for sure is Nefertiti's DNA.
4C, TAT, TCT.
3,000 years after she lived, Zahi's scientists have found this piece of the great queen.
Even if we don't have Nefertiti in the end, at least we have her genes.
For the first time, Zahi has a true identity test for any mummy that could be Nefertiti. Nefertiti's granddaughters will, in time, help find their grandmother.
I'm very excited. This is a major breakthrough because the 2 fetuses will lead us to discover the mummy of Queen Nefertiti one day.
And if they do find her, it'll be only fitting. Nefertiti was the ultimate survivor. Beautiful, powerful, able to reinvent herself right up to the end.
Nefertiti lived an incredible life. Everything seems to be going beautifully, but then things start to crumble. You'd think that this would stop Nefertiti, but actually then she carries on. She manages to rule in her own right. So she surely has to be one of the most powerful women in human history.
And so a new Nefertiti emerges, combining beauty, brains, and strength in unprecedented ways. Her marriage to the most powerful man on Earth was just the beginning. Eventually, she would rule the greatest empire of the ancient world. Yet, even as her legacy now comes to light, she remains just out of reach, and the search for her mummy continues.